All right, so we're going to be doing a little bit of Punnett squared notes today. And since there's so much math, it's kind of something that needs to be written down. So we're going to do them this way instead of on the slideshow. Make sure that you've printed out your notes, that you are ready to write with pen or pencil, and we're going to get going. So probability. First, we're going to talk probability, then we're going to talk Punnett squares, right? Probability describes how likely it is that an event will happen. And I'm going to be filling these out, so I'm going to be working a little slower. Now, these are not guarantees. These are how likely. Like, how likely is it for you to win the lottery? Well, it's not very likely. How likely is it that you're going to eat today? Well, it's pretty darn likely. So probability is how likely it is that something in the future will actually happen. And we get that number through a ratio. And that ratio is the number that you want over the number possible. And we usually change that into a percent. So the number that you want over the number possible, that means that the event that you want to happen, that's your want, the possible is how many different ways it can happen. So let's talk about a coin landing. Heads up. How many different ways can a coin land heads up? Well, there's only one, it's heads. How many different ways are possible for a coin to land? Right? It can land heads or it can land tails. So there are two different ways. That means my probability is 1 out of 2 or 50%. All right, let's say I have a jar of 3 red marbles and 5 blue marbles. And I'm going to reach in and I'm going to pull out a marble. The probability that that is going to be a red marble, well, how many red marbles are there? There are 3. How many total possible marbles can I pull? There are 8. So 3 out of 8 gives me 37.5%. Probability of me pulling out a blue marble, there are 5 marbles, so that would be the number I want is 5. The total number possible is 8, so that gives me 62.5%. If you're wondering, I'm just taking 5 divided by 8, which gives me 0.625. And because it's a percent, I swing this over twice, and we get 62.5%. All right, you're going to need to know percents, but real basic ones. I promise it won't be difficult. If you can count with quarters, you can count with probability here. So we've been talking about genetics, right? Mendel found that there were traits, they got passed on. And he started to realize that there was a way of plotting out what he would come up with, right? He bred 2 tall trees and he ended up with 100% tall trees. He took 2 of those and he found out every single time 25% of them were short. That's based on a Punnett square of probability. So Punnett square is a chart that shows all the different possible combination of alleles. Remember, alleles are the different forms of a gene, like the different forms for hair color or the different forms for shape of a pea from a genetic cross. And that'll make a little more sense once we go through a couple of them. Remember, a genetic cross is when 2 organisms will end up having an offspring. So let's say that rats have brown or white fur. And a lot of what we do here is oversimplified, right? Because rats come in more than just brown or white, right? And they're not solid brown and solid white. They have different shading and there's all sorts of different things that go on with that. But to simplify things, we're going to just say that rats come in 2 versions, all brown or all white. So the letter we're going to use for brown, okay, let's say, oh, I think we need to know which one's dominant. So we're going to say brown is dominant. So the letters that we're going to use would be okay, dominant gets to choose its own letter. So brown, we're going to use a B, and dominant is a capital B. Now, white is the recessive. It doesn't get to choose its own letter, so we have to use the B, like the big B here. So we're going to use a lowercase b for white. So let's say we have a big B, little b rat, and he mates with a little b rat. Now, this is the problem. So you wouldn't have to figure this out. I'm giving you this. What happens when a big B, little b rat mates with a little b rat? And we're going to see what happens. Each parent gives one of their genes to the offspring. That means mommy rat, let's say this one's a mommy rat, can either give their offspring a big B or it can give their offspring a little b. And I'm going to move this up so that you can see that. All right, so this one here goes up here and we split them into these two different letters that they can give. Daddy rat can either give the first little b or the second little b. And I'm going to draw an arrow over there. And we don't know which one mom's going to give or which ones that dad's going to give. But I know that you can get different combinations. So let's say mom gives the big B and daddy gives the little b. Well, that means I have big B, little b as an offspring. All right, just as a standardization, we've all decided that if there's a capital in these, we write them first, typically. All right, let's say mom gives the big B and dad gives this other little b. That means that we have big B, little b. All right, let's say instead mom gives the little b, so we have little b, and dad gives a little b. Then we got little b, little b. Mom gives this b, we got b, and dad gives this b, we got little b, little b. All right, there are 4 different ways that these genes can line up. 2 out of the 4 ended up being big B, little b. So the probability of big B, little b is 2 out of 4, or 50%. That means chances are 50% of the rat babies are going to be big B, little b, or they will be brown. All right, 2 of the other 4 are little b, little b. That means we got 2 out of 4, or 50%. And 50% of the little b are going to look white. All right. We have a lot of information here, right? We got some genes, we got 2 out of 4, we got some percentages, and we got some descriptions. We have in genetics different terms for all of these things. So we're going to go on the second page, flip it over. We're going to go over some of these terms. The first term is phenotype with a PH. And the phenotype is a physical type. That's like a description. What do they look like? So in our case, that would be brown or white would be their phenotype. A genotype is what type their genes are. That means, are they a big B, or maybe a big B, little b, or a little b, little b? What do their genes actually look like? And you'll notice that these two things are different, right? You can be a brown mouse, but that doesn't tell me if you're a big B, or if you're a big B, little b. So genotype and phenotype are slightly different. All right, homozygous means that you have the same alleles for a particular gene. All right, so that means that you either have 2 little b's or you have 2 big B's, and that means homozygous. Homo means same, zygous means zygote, so you are a zygote with the same alleles. Heterozygous means that you have different alleles for that gene. So that means that you would have 1 big and 1 little, or 1 dominant and 1 recessive. All right, so let's put those into practice. Let's talk about Mendel's peas, right? Smooth pea pods are dominant. Wrinkly pea pods are recessive. So let's give them some letters. Smooth pea pods are dominant, so they get their own letter. So we're going to call them a capital S. Now, for me, when I write my capitals, because S's tend to look the same if you're writing them, I tend to put little guys there to make sure that I know it's a capital. And wrinkly pods are little S because they don't even get to pick their own letter. One of the key things that you're going to have a hard time with here is looking at your own writing and figuring out which ones are capital and which ones are lowercase. So be very precise when it comes to that. All right. So if I have big S, my phenotype is what? So my phenotype is, what do they physically look like? What does a P with big S physically look like? Well, its big S is smooth, so their phenotype is smooth. Their genotype means, what genes do they have? They have a capital S. And are they heterozygous or homozygous? That means they have the same alleles or they have different. In this case, they have the same, which is homozygous. All right, let's try it for a capital S, little s. So the phenotype is, what do they physically look like? Capital S is dominant, so that means we are smooth. Genotype are the genes, so I got a big S and a little s. Notice I'm exaggerating my little s. And are their genes heterozygous? Are they different? Or are they homozygous? And here it looks like we got one of each, so we got heterozygous. Let's try that last one. We got little s. Phenotype is, what does it physically look like? It looks wrinkly. Genotype is 2 little s's. And are they the same or different? They are the same, so I got homozygous. Okay, let's try some Punnett squares. And this is what your worksheet's going to look like after we do this. Okay, so we always start with a Punnett square. Heterozygous male with a homozygous white female. Okay, in the previous one I gave you letters, but I'm not giving you letters here. All right, I'm going to start with the female one here. Homozygous white female means, homozygous means 2 of the same, and white, so that she should be little s. All right. Heterozygous male, but it doesn't tell us if it's white or brown with our rats. Oh, but you know what? I'm not sure it matters. Heterozygous means I got one of each. I got a capital S and a little s. Oh, sorry, we should be doing brown and white. Let's change those. Little b, big B, little b. All right, when I'm filling them in on this chart, it doesn't really matter which one goes where. Technically, it's the same chart either way. But as a way of making everybody's life easier, if you put the first one mentioned on top and the second one to the left, your answers will look more like mine. Now, technically, it doesn't matter, and I'll show you. I'll go through and do them both ways. All right, so here we go. We're going to cross. B goes down and the little b goes over. You don't have to draw these arrows. Eventually you'll get really good at these. All right, B goes down and a little b. I got a little b and a little b. And down here we have little b, little b. So that's our Punnett square. But you should have some probabilities. So let's gather these up. These two look the same here. So I got big B, little b. And I got 2 out of 4. Or 50%. That means half of the kids should probably be big B, little b. And they're going to look brown. All right, I got 2 more that are little b, 2 out of 4. Gives me 50% and gives me white. All right, I'm going to show you what happens when we flip this guy and this guy. I'm going to do that pretty quickly just so you guys know what it is. All right, so I flipped which guy goes on the top and which one goes on the side, but I still end up with the same thing, right? I got 2 big B's, just like this guy over here, and I got 2 little B's, just like this one over here. So it doesn't really matter, but if you want to make your life easier when you're checking these, just put the first one on the top. All right, let's try the next one. All right, heterozygous female, that means one of each. Homozygous brown, that's the same, but big B. All right, we're going to put the first one on the top. I just split them up. This BB goes big B, big B. And now we fill in the chart. Let's get this up a little. All right, so we got a big B and a big B. Down here, we end up with a big B and a big B. Over here, we end up with a little b and a big B. And last, we end up with a little b and a big B. And let's gather them up. Okay, we got big B, I got 2 out of 4. It's not always going to be 2 out of 4. It just happens that as the examples I gave were 50%, and they look brown. All right, I got 2 more that are, I'm going to write them the other way, big B, little b. I got 2 out of 4, 50%, and they are also brown, which means 100% of the offspring of these 2 rats will be brown. And sometimes that happens. All right, let's try one more. And I'm going to do this one in color. Probably should have been doing this all along. All right, a homozygous white female. That means 2 of the same genes, white, are little b, little b. And a homozygous brown, which is big B, big B. Let me choose a different color so you guys can see that. All right, so let's see what happens when we cross those. First one goes on top. Second one goes over here. All right, so we have a big B and a little b, and a big B and a little b, and a big B and a little b. All right, and in this case, we end up having all of them are big B, little b, so 100% as big B, little b, which is brown. I'm going to give you one more example before we move on here. So you don't have any more paper to flip over. If you printed this on one side, go ahead and flip them over. If not, just go ahead and stick one right down in here. I'm going to flip it over so you guys have it nice and big. So here we go. We're going to do a heterozygous male with a heterozygous female. And see what we get. And I'm going to do these with beautiful colors so that you can see. All right. Heterozygous means 1 of each, so big B, little b. Heterozygous female, big B, little b. And let's get one more Punnett square. All right, we got the first one's going to go on top. Big B and a little b. Second one goes over here. And let's see what we got crossed here. All right. In this box, we got the big B and the big B from here. Down on the bottom, we got the big B here and the little b there. Over here, we got a little b and a big B. You notice I switched the order there. Because we like to keep the capitals first, you don't always have to. It was just easier for me to rewrite it that way. You got a little b here and a little b there. All right, let's sum it up, see what we got. We have, let me get a beautiful highlighter for us here. We have big B, which is 1 out of 4. 1/4, just like when you go to the grocery store and you pay with cash, right? 1/4 equals 25 cents, 25%, and they're going to be brown. Get a couple other highlighters here, see what we can do. All right, we got 2 big B, little b's. So my big B, little b, I got 2 out of 4, which is 50%. And those are also going to be brown. And last but not least, we have this beautiful little b, little b. I just got 1 out of 4 there for 25%, and that is going to be our white one. Now, remember when we did Mendel's plants, and we did 2 tall ones, gave us 100% tall, And then we took two of those tall ones that looked like this and combined them. And they ended up with 75% of whatever that dominant trait was and 25% of whatever the recessive was. It didn't matter the trait. They always ended up with that 75-25. That's because of this actual Punnett square. All right, remember to take a PDF of your notes, both pages. I don't need to see your face in there. Go ahead and upload those to this assignment. Make sure that you attach the PDF, and then go ahead and work on that Punnett square worksheet. I should be available Tuesday during office hours at 12:30 if you want to come on and ask some questions. Alrighty, thanks so much.